Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm your host, Wendy Corner, and this podcast is for you if you're an entrepreneur. Page, stage, entrepreneur, they come together. You will have some form of published work as an entrepreneur, and you might think, do I? Okay, you may or may not have a solo book or a contributory book. You might have a blog, but I bet you're on socials, aren't you? And what's that if it's not published work? Check that box. What about the stage thing then? Well, every time you open your mouth with intention, it's a stage, whether you'd realize that or not. So even a one-on-one conversation with somebody is a stage. And if you can have a one-on-one conversation with someone, you can do a podcast. Go on, let's have you on this stage, hey? Right, well, that's about the podcast. Now, today, I have the joy and pleasure of introducing you to Teresa Page. Now, I know a little bit about Teresa. She knows herself far better than I do. So I'm going to pass the buck over to you, Teresa, and say, tell us about yourself, who you are and how you came to be where you are now. Cliff notes.
Yes, well, thank you. It's good to be with you and your listening audience. Again, Miss Wendy, we've had the opportunity to have a conversation in times past, but I'm so glad to be back here on today. As you mentioned, my name is Teresa Page. I am actually a native from the state of North Carolina, here in the United States. I have served the federal government as well as higher education and the public education space for over the past 20 years. But along the way, personal development, leadership development has always been a big joy of mine. And so as I have stepped out of all of these former employment opportunities, I am now excited about my new assignment with Teresa K Page, LLC. With Teresa K Page, LLC, I am an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and most recently a podcaster. And I am passionate about employing love as the ultimate success factor to renew women's leadership mindset with fresh fire and fresh purpose. So my goal and my vision is to be that business to business development resource to nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, leadership development, as well as professional organizations, and especially those organizations that champion women's upward mobility. And so I'm just really excited about this new assignment in my life. I just published my third book that I'm sure we're going to talk about in a little bit, that's directly connected to my passion and to my work. So it's an honor to be here with you on today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, so you mentioned then women. Is it purely women that you work with?
Well, yes, primarily that is the foundation of my work. A lot of my work, I do believe, is geared towards women. But as 2024 has shown me and opening my heart to new possibilities, I have opened my doors to be able to do more work with my brothers and all of that, because they are really important to the conversation concerning women. Yes, and so as I move forward in 2025, I look forward to do more work with my brothers as well, in tandem with my sisters.
Got it. Thank you. So fellas, don't stop listening. This is for you as
Don't
well.
stop listening.
Because you might learn a thing or two about the way we women think. And I'm sure you would consider sometimes, are they from a different planet? Because we do tend to think slightly differently. Anyway, so come back in time with me, Teresa. What prompted you to start writing in the first place? I don't mean the mechanics, because we were all roughly about the same age when we did that. But when did you realize that this writing thing was really something special to you?
Yes, so I found that writing was very special to me because I grew up in a very big family. It was 6 girls and 1 boy. And
Oh,
I was
goodness.
this, yes, so very big family. And I was the sixth of the girls. So I was considered the knee baby. And oftentimes when you're in a big family, everyone is talking at once and everyone's trying to get center stage. But again, being in that space, in a lot of ways, I was very shy and was not always able to articulate exactly how I felt. So writing was an escape for me, even very young, as a young girl. It was a way for me to express exactly what I was feeling, either with family dynamics, personally, or even some of the things I may have felt in the world, because I felt a lot of social awareness things, even as a young woman. I think that when writing really took hold for me, when I was maybe in my teenage years, I was in senior high school, somewhere between 10th and 12th grade, and I had the opportunity to um, to present in front of our church organization. We used to have like these Sunday school unions, and if you didn't know, I'm a preacher's kid, so you'll hear some faith-based things about myself. Well, we're going to keep it tight here today. But in this particular space, we had an opportunity one afternoon, and I was to represent my church. Traditionally, I would always sing a song or do a solo or something like that. But in this particular instance, I wanted to read something that I had written, and it was a
Mhm.
social awareness type thing concerning Black Americans in our state here in the United States. And so it was a very heavy topic, but I felt really passionate about it and I wanted to read it and I was nervous about it. So when I read it, I wasn't sure how the people would receive it. And so I just kept my eyes on my paper. Church was packed from
Mm.
front all the way to back. And I was on the pulpit, center stage, and everything. And so I just kept tight to the page, kept tight to the message. But when I finished my last word, the entire church erupted and gave me a standing ovation, and it actually touched their hearts. And I think that was the spark to say, not only is my writing what I feel at my age is important, and that it also pricks the hearts of adults, but also my writing um, in collaboration with my voice that also helped me bring my words alive. So I would say that was probably the moment that I knew that writing would be a big part of my life.
Mm. So this is you in your teenage years.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you think about it, teen years are often a time when we're, we're we're struggling to know who we are. We're separating from mum and dad, and we're finding our groove in terms of our friend circle. Who are we in the world? I mean, this is where an awful lot of these identity issues are going on with teens at the moment. And there you are standing up in front of how many people?
I would say on that particular day, it could have been about 100 to 150. It was a small church, but it was still very packed. So that was a truly experience for me.
So this is your first outing with public writing and public speaking.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, baptism of fire, why not? Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, so that was when you really got the passion for it. Were you were writing through university, through college?
Absolutely. And that's probably where I started to kind of build my bones a little bit, exercise that writing muscle, especially in college and especially in my graduate studies. That's where I really started to stretch out to really understand what kind of writer that I was. I was able to write on a professional level.
Mhm.
I was really good at doing descriptive writing, those kind of things. Oftentimes, sometimes my professors would want to use my writings as an example for their other classes. It even got to the point where one of my teachers, one of my professors, actually thought I should consider being a language arts teacher. And I was like, you must be crazy. I'm not, because I will put a comma, I will put a colon, a semicolon anywhere, but she was like, these are dynamics that you can learn, but you're a great writer.
Yeah.
I didn't follow that path, but it's still, I still find a great benefit for it. So in the college space is really where I started to kind of build my muscle for writing. And
Mm.
so and that's kind of carried over so into the work that
Brilliant.
I'm doing today.
Excellent, excellent. And now, of course, you're working with, you said you had a background in education. So you were working at different levels within education.
Absolutely. So I started out actually, once I finished my undergrad, I ended up working in the public school system.
Mhm.
So I wasn't in the classroom. I was more so in the business office, operated in the business space. But I did have a lot of opportunities to engage with the professional association. I had a lot of opportunities to mentor groups of girls, and different things like that. And so writing, I think, became more so as a communications piece for me, especially from my point of view. I would have to often communicate to our entire staff, faculty and staff on behalf of my principals, or I would need to communicate, making sure that even when I was mentoring young girls or young people, that I was writing at a level that they could understand. And so there were so many different ways I was able to communicate. And plus, I had a leadership position with our professional organization. So I had to also learn how to communicate to larger audiences that it included administrators, faculty, as well as paraprofessionals. So in that workspace, that also helped me to develop my writing, but more so about communication and being able to convey whatever the message it was according to the audience that I needed to speak to.
Know
And
your
then,
audience.
having leadership that trusted me to do that, that was really important.
Absolutely. And knowing your audience and speaking to that audience, either in highfalutin speak or basic speak. Absolutely. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was where, excuse me. So that was where you had your writing journey. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. So we've heard already that your speaking debut probably was that occasion when you had your script. Tell us a bit more about your speaking journey since.
Yes, so I would say from my speaking journey since then, again, being in that education space, not only was I having to communicate written wise, but I also started doing a lot of professional developments. So I oftentimes had to do professional developments with our faculty and with our staff. And so, or our organization, professional organization. So that also had to help me to develop my speaking. One of the things is also learning. I'm very script oriented. I need to know what I'm going to say. I always have to have my notes. But then there has been times where either technology would glitch on me or my printer would glitch on me, and I would have to learn to be able to speak out of the abundance of my heart. And so that sometimes was very interesting and was very scary. But it also sometimes will help me build a closer connection with my audience. So, and then, like I said, as you write, you kind of you're consuming the information. Either the information is coming out of you, or it's kind of almost, not to use a gross word, but almost like a regurgitation, because you're pouring it out of you, but you're also having to study to put information inside of you. So eventually it gets into not only just your brain, but it also gets into your heart. So you're able to also convey it, even if the technology is not being friendly, or even if you don't have your script. I think from a speaker point of view, speaker and writer point of view, especially those who are more script oriented, learning to trust the information that you already know. A lot of times when you're put in those tough positions, you know more than you think. And so being able to speak from the abundance of your heart was definitely helpful. But I would say moving forward from the education space, I then went into the higher education space. And so that was totally different because, well, not too much. I was still doing professional developments, but to larger groups.
So you
So
were
to larger,
facilitating these groups?
ma'am?
You were facilitating and training these groups?
Absolutely. Leadership development, either having to be an MC, having to be the facilitator, having to do the professional development or the leadership development myself. And so, being able to speak to bigger rooms with either new student orientations or with the National Society of Leadership and Success, where I was an advisor, or even being able to address our faculty and our professors. And again, now in the higher education space, I also had the opportunity to be the executive assistant to our regional president. So being able to communicate to leadership in a way in a language that they can understand as well. So, and communicating with them, both with speech and in writing. So I've had a little bit more development even in that higher education space. And there is also where I started my writing journey as far as writing my first book. So that was pretty cool too.
Yes, yes. Yeah, oh, exciting, exciting. So we've got a lovely opportunity there, as you've said that. So you've done keynoting as well, have you?
Yes, I have done some keynote opportunities as well. Mostly in the faith-based space, where I've had the opportunity to bring what people may understand as a message or your initial message. Over the years, I was a Sunday school teacher and things like that, but actually having to bring a message on a Sunday morning, that was kind of scary. That was kind of scary.
So
and putting
you've got the
together
keynote experience. You've also got MC and facilitator and trainer.
Yes,
Whoa, because I mean, audience, those are all distinct, complementary, but distinct skill sets.
absolutely.
If you're listening to this going, oh, you couldn't do that. Keynoting doesn't have to be where it's at, because a lot of people consider public speaking as purely the keynoting. Now,
Yeah,
if you've got a really good business book, you've got your ideas down on paper, teaching that, training from that, facilitating workshops from that. That is a real art, and that could probably get you more exposure, more book sales, because people literally get a try before you buy.
absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So your speaking experience is broad as well as your writing experience. Great. And tell us a bit about this book that you've just published last year, 24.
Yes. My last book is part of, it's actually the third book in a series. It's called My Journey to Wholeness. And so this is the third book within that series. And so the entire series really has been my journey, basically, as far as my growth, as far as finding my purpose, healing from my past, learning to love myself, understanding my place in the world. I think in between book 2 and 3, is where I was finally trying to figure out, well, where is my place? Because I am multi-talented. That's not boastful. It's just one of those things that there's not too many things you could put in front of me that I can't figure out what to do. But I've always been on search as far as what is my purpose or what is my message. And so that kind of this book is kind of a culmination of maybe a couple of years of development when I finally felt like I learned what my purpose was. And so just really quickly, in 2015, I was at a Women's History Month event in downtown Atlanta. And that's where I was introduced to my purpose. There was a room full of women of different backgrounds, different businesses, ethnicities, continents. And we were in this space basically talking about business. But there was a lady that came to the stage or came to the microphone, and she asked the question, out of all of the powerful things that women can do, it still feels like there is something to hold us back. And she wanted to know, what is it? And of course, the room kind of was throwing out different things that we've all been conditioned to say, well, negative self-talk or imposter syndrome or other things that seem to just plague women's minds and souls. But in that, I felt like that was my purpose. It kind of like hit me that, oh, well, Teresa, this is what you're supposed to be doing, is to help take the lid off of women's capacity. And so that was where I felt like my purpose was born, was to take that lid, whatever that lid is, to help loosen that lid off of women's capacity. And so from that particular moment forward, at that time I was publishing my first book. It was in the middle of being published. And so I just felt like, this is it. This is the book. I got the book. I already know how we gonna do this. And
that was when you were publishing book 1.
Yes, this was publishing book 1, but I took off just really quickly, I took off really quickly, just thinking that this first book was going to be the thing, but it turned out not to be the thing. With all of my efforts with trying to do book readings and all these other kind of things and trying to get other events off the ground, I messed around and used all of my resources that was intended to support my life, and I ended up losing everything. And in the midst of losing everything, that is when my development began. And so in that development, what I learned was it wasn't so much about what was holding women back, but it was more so what we needed more of a revelation of, and that was the power of love, the simple power of love. And so once I understood that, I went through this process of purpose development to understand how love really does work in the life of women. And so through the years, and especially after coming out of the education space in 2021, I learned many lessons about how love and leadership kind of collaborates together, how they correlate together. And so through those lessons that I've learned through leadership and all of these other things of real life circumstances that I had, I was finally able to pen to paper what those lessons were, how love really does affect us as women, as leaders, how it generates, helps us generate our creativity, how it really does help us to establish a good and a service that we could turn into a business, and all sorts of things. And so that opportunity allowed me to create a women's leadership conference. And I then took that leadership conference and took everything and put it in a book. So just about
two.
Book number 3, which is the birth of book number 3.
Okay,
yes,
so I'm missing book 2. Where did book 2 come in? What was that one about?
So book 2 came in the midst of this development, and that one was called Love, My Journey to Wholeness, Love Letters from the Throne. So those were some of the lessons that I was learning about love in real time, but I was sharing those lessons with a person of interest. It was a gentleman that I had met, that I kind of fancied a little bit, and I was communicating with him through email the lessons that I was learning. And I didn't realize these were real lessons. I'm thinking I'm just communicating. And it turns out I was able to take a portion, things that were not too private, but take a portion of those communications about those real lessons that I was learning about love and leadership. And I took those communications and I put them in book 2. So book 2 is also kind of those, yes, so those are real life lessons that I was learning in real time that I was sharing with a person that I really cared about. I was thinking they were just emails, but they turned out to be great lessons. And so I put those in book 2. Yes.
Audience, have you just realized what we've heard? All of this blogging and the social media stuff and the things that you've been putting out, you've got the basis of a book there, even if you weren't aware of it. Repurpose,
Absolutely.
repurpose. It's all there. I know a colleague of mine who runs podcasts, and he takes all the recordings of his guests, transcribes them, and puts them in a book. If you're considering the fact that, oh, I'm not much of a writer, I don't know how, I'm not really good with the mechanics, I might be a bit dyslexic. We've all got one of these, haven't we? Talk into it. We can transcribe that, get a good editor, job done, book done. Page with the stuff that you've already got. Oh, thank you, Teresa, for actually sharing. And it happened from Amex. I love it.
It did. It absolutely did. And thank you for giving me that idea as far as that transcribing podcast. So I might be book 4 in the distance.
Well, I mean, there's another colleague of mine who has he's interviewed 700 people in his history, and he's distilled the lessons from pretty much all of them. And he wrote a book which was basically a letter to himself, as it were. I won't spoil it, but It was those life lessons. And I think he had 12 chapters because he distilled down all the life lessons he'd learned from these people that he'd interviewed. And I went, how cool is that? So yes, absolutely. I love that idea. So that was book 2. Book 3, remind us, book 3 is the culmination of your conference work, isn't it?
Yes, yes, yes. So book 3 is kind of like a continuation from book 2. Book 2 were some of the life lessons that I was learning in real time, and I was sharing those in email. So from that time until I actually started penning the conference, which was in 2021, which was probably about a span of 2 years, I had the opportunity to then pen all of those lessons, kind of break them down in different huge subjects, break them down. And then I created my Women's Leadership Conference. And so from the leadership conference, and because I scripted all of that, I was like, this is enough material for book 3. And this also helps me to create a resource to collaborate along with my conference. And so that's the birth of book 3. Taking just about everything out of the conference and putting it in a book as well as in a workbook. So I have a reference guide workbook that goes along with this book. So it's actually like book 3.5. So
I love it.
that's what this one is. But what's great about it is that I had to adjust it slightly so that an individual didn't feel like they could just get the book and not do the conference, or that they could just do the conference and not get the book. They actually work together. And so I'm really excited about that because it gives me something else that I can offer along with the conference. And it's titled after the book, or the book is titled after the conference, Love the Success Factor. And so this book is actually the focus of my work. It's the heart of why Teresa K Page LLC actually exists and why I exist as an author and as a speaker. So everything that I am, everything that I have to offer is in this book and it's in this conference. So that's what I'm really focused on. Yes. And this one really deep dives as far as that correlation between love and leadership.
How often do you run your conferences?
Yes, so I run my conferences annually. I kind of started I initially started with them annually, and then I determined maybe about a year or so ago to do them quarterly. But as I move forward, yes, in 2025, my goal is to be able to restructure it as private events. So then that way I'm able to work directly either with small groups, whether they're family and friends, or with small teams, or with congregation. And so the good thing is that it's multi-purpose, it's multifaceted. So it can fit any of those groups. And of course, being able to adjust again to the audience that you're communicating with. But I really wanted them to be, as I move forward with the idea of presenting them as private events, I want us to be able to have that intimate opportunity to not where I'm only just facilitating, but that the audience has the opportunity to actually start, especially if there's ideas that love will help bring back to the surface as we talk about love and there's these aha moments. We have the opportunity for them to kind of write out what they're talking about, and to start formulating and getting those juices running again as far as the things that they need to move forward with. So my goal is to be able to work in intimate groups, in groups of 5 or more, moving forward. And as they grow, awesome. But my goal is to be able to kind of do them in that boutique style kind of framework, working with being able to almost have that really close relation and intimate experience.
Lovely. So are those all in-person events?
They can be. It's actually designed as virtual, especially as I'm starting to broaden my relationships with individuals and groups in different parts of the world. But we will definitely do it on location. So wherever, however the need is, whether on site or virtual, it fits. It fits wherever we go. Yes, so it can be done both on site as well as virtually.
I was envisaging a physical in-person thing, but the fact that you can do it online, because obviously this is an international podcast, Okay, all good. So this opportunity is available to our entire audience, regardless of where in the world we are.
Regardless. That's what we do. And that's the power of, I love the fact that that's the approach that I'm now taking with my business. While I do want to establish relationships locally where I am using technology, I want to have that open globe approach. And so that's exactly what this conference being it will do. And having that agility to do it on site or virtually, it gives me that opportunity to do so.
Beautiful. So this is you presenting your work at a conference.
Absolutely.
Got it. Lovely. Thank you for clarifying that. Oh, so good. So good. So we talked about your writing. Excuse me. We've talked about your writing. We've talked about your speaking. We've talked about this latest book. Are there going to be any more books? Anything percolating?
You know, I believe that there will be more books. I think there's probably book 4 kind of hanging around in me now. Um, I'm considering doing a volume 2 of book number 2, which was Love Letters from the Throne, and that's maybe pulling out more lessons that I was learning um, during that particular time. So I may pull out more information from some of those emails that I had before. That was to create that volume 2 of book number 2. And so that may be a continuation. That one I haven't quite thought about. Initially, that was the plan until we were kind of hit with COVID. And when COVID kind of hit, book 3 became more sense of urgency, I felt at the particular time. And so, you know, times are still interesting, very interesting, probably more so now. But I think there may be opportunity to go back and do volume 2. But then also, Wendy, seriously, you did just give me a great idea as far as transcribing podcasts, because that's something that I just started doing about a year ago. And I've been having some really influential conversations, and that's something I've never considered. So that you got my brain turning here. So that might be book 5 and 6. So they're coming. But what I find is, Wendy, just really quickly, is that I have to live an experience before I can write about it.
Yes.
If I was a fiction writer, it probably would be different. But a lot of my work is from real life experiences. So I don't know what the next journey will be. I have ideas bumping around, but we'll see. But I know that there are more books to come. I don't think this is my final one, even though I feel like this is my magnus opus. I don't think that this is the final work.
Never say never, because you do
Absolutely.
that. Somebody upstairs goes, oh, I've got something for you. Just get this one out, would you? Okay.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we talked about your writing, we've talked about your speaking, we've talked about this group of books, your volume 1, volume 1.5, volume 2, potentially volume 2.5 coming up, and 3, and some more on the way. Beautiful, thank you. You do your speaking, as we've heard. So I'm going to ask you, how do you embody your words when you take them from page to stage?
When I'm speaking, how do I embody my words? I would say that, again, it comes from real life experience. And being able to kind of share with my audience. Oftentimes, I think that when we're on stage, we're looked to be the authority on a particular matter. And that might be the case, to be an expert or at least wanting to share a particular thought process and things like that. But I think that because I have to physically experience whatever it is that I'm writing about, and if I am to present to a particular group of people, I want to be able to convey my words that will relate to them and will relate to the audience and have that personal connection, where that we're able to relate. But not relate in a way that we're just going to marinate in our troubles or in our trauma, but to understand that we may go through certain things, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And also being able to convey that whatever it is that we may have experienced, that it is it's actually us building our resume to be able to support others when we come out on the other side. So being able to convey my words on stage is really about being able to relate. And also, even though I might be in a keynote opportunity, I've also found that having it's almost like a two-way conversation. Having the audience being able to convey back to me. I may ask a question and may ask for some feedback in real time. That might be whether I'm on stage or even virtually. Being able to pause and maybe ask someone a question about what I just said or forming a question. It allows the audience to kind of get into the groove with me, so we're not necessarily feeling like we're in this alone. So being able, it's almost for me, is almost creating that two-way conversation. So that's another way for me to help kind of bring my words to life, because I'm not just speaking words, but how can you apply these words to your life right now? So if we can help develop some solutions to maybe some of the problems that they may have, then I feel that's a win-win for
Yes,
everyone. And again, it kind of closes the gap in between speaker and audience. And
yeah.
that's just my approach. It may not work for everyone, but I found that it
I
has
love the
worked for
fact
me
that,
thus
as
far.
you say, you're bridging the gap, because otherwise, if we're seen as so high up, then the audience are going, I could never do that. I could never do that. Whereas if you give those in between steps, you're not so far above me that I can't go, okay, well, I could do the next step. Yeah, that's feasible. Okay. And as you say, you bring that experience that you've had. The way I like to describe it is you're speaking from the scars, not the wounds, so that people can go, oh yeah, she's been through it. I can see that scar. And it also means that you can relate from a position of, this is what I've learned from it. We're sealed over.
Exactly.
I'm quite proud of my scars because of the stuff that went into those, but this is what I've learned as a result of it. Yeah, love it. Thank you. Thank you. As we're winding up, have you got any final words of wisdom for us?
Yes, I would just say, Wendy, we're in a very interesting space and time, for all of us, regardless of where we are in the world. Um, I would just say to the audience, whether they're looking to write, whether they're looking to be on somebody's stage, or just going with their regular day-to-day life, I would like to just remind them to be convinced of their own greatness. And so, because our times are different, things are changing. And this may be a great time to start doing some inner reflection about what's great about you, what's wonderful about you, even what some of your challenges, or even if you have some Achilles heels, and to start really zoning in on how special you are in this particular time, and really giving yourself this self-care that you need, not just as a way to soothe, but to help you remain steady during this particular time. And also, while you're searching within yourself as far as your own greatness, to then figure out, how can I take this greatness and turn it into something, whether it's a gifting or an ability. How can I turn it into something tangible, to either give to my family, or to give to my community, or to give to the global world at hand, to help us all to be steady in extraordinary and in difficult times. I do feel in some ways we're going to have some difficult days ahead, but if we focus in on what makes us great, we can all definitely be that light that our family, our community, or that the world needs. So just remain steady, understand how amazing and wonderful you are, find out what's great about you, turn it into something that's tangible, whether it's a book, whether it's a good, whether it's a service, or whatever it is, and give it to those around you that you love and that you care about, so that we can be steady and move forward as the 21st century people that we are.
As you say, we live in turbulent times. So the more collective individuals are holding steady, then that almost builds a life raft of individuals next to each other, connecting with each other, as you said, offering that tangible thing. And we will ride this storm. It won't be the last storm that we have, and it certainly hasn't been the first storm that there's been in life. It might be the most major storm that any one of us individually are facing, but we can do it together. Oh, I love that.
Yes, we win.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing your From Page to Stage.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to be with you, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Take care. Bye-bye from us.